America had built engines before, powerful ones, reliable ones, even revolutionary ones, but in 1940, when news spread that the United States would be producing a licensed copy of Britain's revered Rolls-Royce Merlin, many across Europe snickered. The British, under relentless German bombing, needed manufacturers capable of large-scale precision production. The Americans offered to help. But critics said the Americans were too late, too unfamiliar with British tolerances, and too arrogant to replicate the most advanced piston engine in the world. A copy, some laughed. It will never match the original. They did not understand what would actually emerge from Detroit's factories. They did not imagine that the company chosen, Packard, a luxury carmaker famous for smooth engines and hand-fitted craftsmanship, would take one of Britain's greatest wartime inventions and multiply it with American mass production brute force. They did not expect 55,000 identical, perfect, roaring power plants that would lift fighters into the sky at a rate Germany could never match. And they did not predict that these engines would help bury the Luftwaffe under a tide of thunderous wings. When Packard executives were first approached by the British Purchasing Commission in 1940, they were unsure if copying the Merlin was wise. The engine was astonishingly complex, 1,650 parts, tight tolerances measured in fractions of a hair, superchargers requiring flawless balance at 25,000 RPM, carburetors that defied gravity, pistons that ran hotter than most furnaces. Packard could build fine automobiles, yes, but aircraft engines were a different universe. Yet the company had something Rolls-Royce lacked, the ability to build thousands of identical engines, each as perfect as the last. British factories were filled with dedicated craftsmen carefully hand-fitting each Merlin. It made the engine exquisite, but slow to produce. War did not wait. The Luftwaffe did not wait. Britain needed engines faster than craftsmen could finish them. So Packard took the challenge. The team traveled to England to study the engine. What they found was brilliant engineering wrapped in British handmade tradition. Rolls-Royce engineers were protective, proud, and skeptical that American factories could meet their precision. At first, they clashed over tolerances. Packard engineers said mass production required standardized measurements. The British insisted on preserving the Merlin's soul. One British engineer reportedly snapped, "You cannot simply stamp out Merlins like tin toys." A Packard man replied, "Perhaps. But we can make thousands." Rolls-Royce eventually accepted that speed was essential. If Packard could build Merlins quickly and reliably, Britain might survive the year. So they opened their blueprints, explained their methods, and let the Americans begin a process few believed was possible. Packard did not merely copy the Merlin, they remastered it. They translated all blueprints from British measurements to American standards. They redesigned parts to suit high-volume machining. They improved oil passages, strengthened connecting rods, refined supercharger gears, and fixed minor design issues Rolls-Royce had not yet had time to address. They introduced automated quality checks, new alloys, and American carburetor technology. Rolls-Royce received the modifications with raised eyebrows. Some were indignant. Others realized the Americans had found ways to make the Merlin more consistent and easier to mass produce. Once the first Packard unit ran flawlessly on the test stand, skepticism began to fade. When the second and third roared to life identically, the laughter stopped. But as Packard ramped up production, across the ocean, German pilots still trained, confident in their aircraft and engines. The Luftwaffe believed it was unbeatable. It had devastated Poland, smashed France, and nearly strangled Britain during the Battle of Britain. But Hitler made a mistake. He shifted focus to the Soviet Union and eased pressure on the RAF. British factories breathed again, and with America's impending entry into the war, hope rose. What no German strategist realized was that a massive wave of future Allied aircraft, powered by Packard Merlins, was about to take shape. These were not just engines for British fighters. The Americans intended to use them too. Among the first U.S. aircraft to receive the Packard Merlin was the P-40F, transforming it from an underpowered fighter into a more capable machine. But the real revolution was yet to come, the mating of the Packard Merlin with the North American P-51 Mustang. When the Mustang was originally built for the British, it used an Allison V1710 engine, fast at low altitude but weak above 15,000 feet. The RAF loved its airframe but hated the engine's altitude performance. Someone proposed a wild idea: why not put a Merlin in it? The British tried it first with a Rolls-Royce unit. The results were stunning. Suddenly the Mustang became a fighter that could climb with a Spitfire, dive like a Thunderbolt, and outrange anything in the sky. When Packard production scaled up, the Mustang gained wings of steel and endurance. Without Packard, the P-51 would have been just a good plane. With Packard, it became one of history's greatest interceptors and long-range escorts. The United States Army Air Forces had a problem in 1943. Their heavy bombers, B-17s and B-24s, were suffering catastrophic losses on deep strikes into Germany. Fighters like the P-47 Thunderbolt had good performance but terrible range. They could accompany bombers only partway. Once they turned back, German Bf-109s and Fw-190s descended on the bomber formations like wolves. Entire squadrons were torn apart before they reached their targets. America needed a guardian for the bombers, something fast, long-legged, deadly, and present from start to finish. The P-51 with a Packard Merlin was the answer. The first groups of Mustang escorts appeared over Europe in late 1943. German pilots initially assumed they were simply new Spitfires. Then they began noticing an unwelcome pattern. Whenever they climbed to attack the bombers, sleek fighters appeared above them, always above them. The Packard Merlin's two-stage supercharger let the Mustangs maintain incredible power at high altitude. German pilots were used to the P-47 Thunderbolt, which was fast but less maneuverable. They were not prepared for Mustangs diving out of the sun, keeping pace at altitude, accelerating in climbs, and chasing them all the way back to their airfields. Luftwaffe morale began to crack. By early 1944, massive swarms of Merlin-powered Mustangs escorted every major bomber strike deep into Germany. The Luftwaffe tried everything: head-on attacks, mass formations, ambush tactics, but nothing worked. The escorts always arrived, always had fuel, always engaged with terrifying energy. Packard Merlins screamed through the thin air above Berlin, Leipzig, Munich, and Hamburg. They chased German fighters down to the treetops, then circled overhead waiting for them to rise again. Many German veterans later admitted that once the P-51 entered full service, the war in the air was lost. But the Packard Merlin did not just appear in fighters. It powered legendary aircraft across multiple fronts. The de Havilland Mosquito used them, twin-engined wooden fighters and bombers so fast the Germans struggled to intercept them. Night fighters with Merlin power hunted down German intruders. Reconnaissance planes sprinted across enemy lines, capturing photographs no other aircraft could manage. The British Lancaster bomber used Merlins, albeit Rolls-Royce originals, on its path to destroy factories and cities. Packard's versions, nearly identical in design and performance, kept Allied air wings humming. The combined might of British engineering and American manufacturing became a tidal wave. During 1944's Big Week, the Allies launched a campaign to cripple the Luftwaffe's aircraft industry. Mustang escorts, almost all Packard Merlin powered, flew escort after escort. The Luftwaffe threw everything it had into the defense. Yet pilot losses soared, aircraft production fell, training programs collapsed. Germany could no longer replace its veteran aces. Every Packard Merlin built in Detroit pushed the Luftwaffe one step closer to collapse. The German high command noticed something terrifying: these engines simply would not stop coming. Every month, more Mustangs arrived. Every month, Mosquitos grew bolder. Every week, another squadron switched to Merlin power. It became clear that Germany was fighting an industrial empire far more capable than it had imagined. Packard's Detroit plant produced engines with astonishing consistency, tighter tolerances than wartime Rolls-Royce could manage. American factories had the advantage of standardized processes, interchangeable parts, and automation. Rolls-Royce excelled in craftsmanship, Packard excelled in quantity without losing quality. Combined, they created an unstoppable flow of perfectly running engines. The 55,000 Packard Merlins built during the war were identical. Any piston from one engine could replace another. Any crankshaft could fit any block. Aircraft mechanics loved the engines because they were reliable, predictable, and durable. This meant squadrons could keep more planes flying more often, with fewer breakdowns, and less maintenance time. The Luftwaffe struggled constantly with engine reliability issues due to shortages, rushed production, and decreasing quality. Their late war engines were powerful but fragile. Meanwhile, the Allies had engines built to almost peacetime standards despite the war's chaos. This reliability translated directly into combat victories. As the Allies advanced in 1944 and 1945, Packard Merlins pushed deeper into the heart of Germany. Mustangs guarded bombers leveling factories. Mosquitos destroyed rail hubs, chemical plants, and secret research sites. Night fighters patrolled dark skies, hunting desperate German intruders. By the time American tanks crossed the Rhine, the Luftwaffe was a shell of its former self, shattered, scattered, and drained of pilots. The killing blow had not come from a single aircraft or tactic but from relentless, overwhelming pressure powered by thousands of identical engines. One Luftwaffe officer later remarked, "We did not lose to the Mustang. We lost to the engine that made the Mustang possible." Another wrote in his diary, "Every time I saw a long-range escort, I thought to myself, somewhere in America is a factory that never sleeps." He was right. Packard's factories ran night and day, workers moving like clockwork, engines emerging like steel soldiers. When the war ended, Rolls-Royce executives privately admitted that Packard had done more than build copies. They had taken a brilliant engine and industrialized it perfectly. Packard, in turn, had nothing but admiration for Rolls-Royce's original design. The partnership remained one of the most successful technological alliances in wartime history. Today, historians often talk about P-51 Mustangs or Mosquitos, or the brave aircrews who flew them. But behind every sortie, every mission deep into enemy territory, and every victory over German interceptors was a laborer in Detroit tightening a bolt, measuring a cylinder wall, or testing a crankshaft. Those workers, thousands of miles from the battlefield, built engines that shaped the sky. They laughed at America's copy. They believed a luxury car company could not build a masterpiece of aviation engineering. They underestimated the power of an industrial giant once it focused its full weight behind an Allied cause. But when 55,000 Packard Merlins roared into combat, drowning out the Luftwaffe and clearing the skies over Europe, the laughter stopped. What remained was the sound of Allied victory, driven by pistons, powered by precision, and forged in the factories of a nation determined to help win the war. And in the end, the Packard Merlin did not just fly. It carried hope, strength, and unity into the sky. It helped end a war that consumed continents. It buried an air force that once terrorized the world. And it proved that when nations combine brilliance with industrial might, even the most confident enemy can be overwhelmed. America's copy was no copy at all. It was a promise, one that roared at 1,600 horsepower and helped change the course of history.